I will talk about 4 key trends, and this is apart from our most recent China consumer report when I want to talk about what we're observing. I want to share a bit about consumer confidence. I think many of you will have read that the consumer confidence this summer has reached a 10-year high. So we are in a good mood. Consumers are happy, but let me also talk about basically how the Chinese consumer and the macroeconomic development go together and what are potential risks from what this may bring. I mentioned the gyms already in my basically opening words. I would like to talk a bit more in general about health. And I think what's interesting on the health side is also how the interpretation of health is very different in China than in other parts of the world. I think no presentation without talking about the post-90s, or millennials, as you may want to call them. And we're showing basically how that is shifting, what part basically of growth will come from that group. And the last point, and that's actually my favorite, is talking a bit about the question around brand preferences, particularly in the notion of Chinese brands versus foreign brands. I think there's been a lot of talk around that, about Chinese brands basically gaining market share. Why is that? Is it an element of nationalism? There's so many questions around that, so I would like to actually put a bit of time into that to demystify some of the claims which are being made around that and what's really happening here. So I think those are the 4 main trends to talk about. Confidence. I mentioned 10-year high. That was summer of this year. This is a source from the National Bureau of Statistics, and people have asked me whether that's basically the only source we're looking at, and whether that should give us enough confidence that the consumer is indeed confident. And I think the good news is our own research in that respect is just one data point per year, but it does support basically the overall metrics as well. And also the Financial Times, I think you may have seen, I think today actually they released their monthly consumer confidence report about China, and it was actually yet again, I think they started only doing it sometimes around 2010 or 11, and for them it is this month's actually an all-time high. So the answer is whatever source you look at, you have a consumer who is extraordinarily confident. The other thing though, which is worth noting, is this. And this is very different from what you would see in other countries. It's extremely volatile. So the changes in consumer confidence, and these are numbers which are shown on a quarterly level, is very high. So what does it mean for next year? The honest answer is we don't know. Because you talk about a consumer who has been extremely successful, still seeing income rises, still seeing very low unemployment. Real estate has done very well again in this year, which basically led to wealth being accumulated, first-time travel to overseas. So you have a consumer who is happy, you have a consumer who believes that will continue. But this is just from the consumer point of view, because there's also the dimension of the economy. So I think the numbers here will continue to look the way they do, which will directly trace into consumption, as well as long as the economy is going sufficiently well to support low unemployment and salary increases. Because you talk about a generation who only know one way when it comes to salaries, which is up, and only know one thing, which is employment, which is I have employment. And that's obviously very different. So my biggest concern actually on China in that respect is if that is at one point of time no longer the case, there's nobody around here can say, you know what, this is a recession, just happens, and it will all be good again. But you have basically this volatile situation, and if the volatile situation basically really happens that it drops, the consumers lack the confidence, then this can really be a very downward spiral, because maybe people hold then back consumption, which yet again would be negative for the economy. Having said that, you can say, I'm not going to put a stick on the ground, what I see will be basically the future. I'm just saying that it has been volatile, and only because everything is rosy right now doesn't mean it needs to be rosy tomorrow.
So where does this volatility come from when salaries are always rising, everybody has always work?
Yes.
So why
yes. It's actually, it's first of all, it's a very good question. you can see the changes, and you can see even more on monthly levels based on individual, basically, incidents. For example, there was a stock market crash. But it's not a stock market crash how you have it usually, that which then is a start of like a year of basically misery, but it's like one day and everything is bad, and then basically people comment on their consumer confidence and suddenly it's low. So, and then basically something positive happens again and everything is good. You have a very impulsive consumer who basically is very fast in switching minds. I think you will also, let me give you another example, you will also have heard of those examples where consumer brands are created. So there's this famous yogurt, or yogurt category even, Ili launched, which turned into $1 billion business in just 18 months. It's massive. It's a trend hits, people basically catch it, bring it up. At the same time then, it's not a sustainable position, so things then fade away again. So you really have a lot of volatility, and I'm talking about this on this chart, but you have it in the whole, basically, consumption pattern and behaviors. If you look at, and it's actually a pity I didn't bring that chart, it's also one of my favorite charts. If you look at market shares of car companies, particularly Chinese companies, it's a bit better for the foreign companies. Their revenues in China look like that if you look them on an annual basis. So they are plus 50%, then they're minus 60%, and they're again plus 50%, because it's model launches, it's a new marketing. So the same way basically how people are, if I put it positive, agile in changing their mind. They're basically also very basically fast and quick in changing their consumption pattern. So I think you see that across the board. That's why I'm not totally surprised seeing the volatility.